Neil's got some fairy dust over him. I mean, he's like this magical creature. I mean, the guy walks in and just lights up the room.
Natural echo, natural echo.
He had this great enthusiasm. Everything was overly stated. Oh, it was so wonderful, and it was the most fabulous thing.
Do-do-do down, do-dee-do down, down.
He's a very unusual man.
Neil was never a matinee idol. He was a Brooklyn kid. I mean, he ate Mrs. Stahl's condition. He grew up in Brighton Beach.
I was very lucky. Between 1958 and 1963, I sold 40 million records.
Within 24 months, no one wanted the music of Neil Sedaka.
Then in 1963, a new group came in called the Beatles. Well, people walked up to me in Brooklyn and said, "Didn't you used to be Neil Sedaka?" Not good.
And Neil Sedaka rose from the dead.
It was great to see someone who'd been away from the scene a long time and suddenly come up with like 5 or 6 smash hits. It was great, and he deserved it.
He's a simple guy who could equally be as happy going for a hot dog at Nathan's and going on the Cyclone.
That's the kind of person he is. And if I say, I'm going to cry.
When I was a kid riding on the Brooklyn subway, I wanted to be famous. You have to be careful of what you wish for.
Rainy days and the happy way I feel inside.
Neil Sedaka, 16-year-old pianist, is going to play for us first the Reflet dans l'eau of Debussy.
First of all, music was his life. From the minute he was born, he would not eat unless I sang to him. He was the type of a boy, whatever he knew was on his tongue. In Jewish, we would say, "Was es öffentlich is öffentlich singing." Whatever overhears your heart and lungs comes out of your mouth. He doesn't know from the chachmas. He doesn't know how to lie, unfortunately.
My mom was told that she should not get pregnant with a second child because she had a toxemic poisoning with Ronnie, my sister. And when she did get pregnant, she tried to get rid of me in every which way you can imagine. Taking Epicac to throw up. My mom went on the roller coasters of Coney Island, hoping that she could abort this baby.
Neil Sedaka was indeed born on March 13th, 1939, in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn.
I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment here with 11 people and 1 bathroom. My mother and father, my sister, Ronnie, my grandmother and grandfather, my 5 aunts. And it was very crowded, but it was very warm. The Brighton Beach baths were across the street where I learned how to play paddle tennis with Freddie Gershon.
I lived on the 6th floor, Neil lived on the 2nd floor. I faced the front, he faced the rear. Neil's daddy was Max Sedaka. Max Sedaka was a gentle, dear guy. He was a cab driver. And he worked very hard. And he had a modest income. And Eleanor worked in an undergarments factory, Carnival Creations, I think it was called.
Eleonora, we call her. She spoke perfect Spanish. She married a Spanish Jew and didn't want them to talk about her when she first got married, so she learned the Spanish language fluently.
At some point in time in the late 40s, my mother found a piano, an upright piano for $25, and she bought it. And Neil and I used to do what kids do, bang around on the piano.
The smell of the ivory was like intoxicating for me. I loved the smell and the touch of the ivory keyboard. I think that was the first thing that drew me to the piano.
I couldn't afford a piano. I've got some woman came to sell me an old piano, and I gave her $500, which I paid out in payments.
I used to practice 6-7 hours a day. I started with the Bela Bartok Mikrokosmos pieces for children. That was at 8 years old. So I really loved it.
When he got a little bit older, about 8, I took him to a teacher. She said to Mrs. Sedaka, I cannot teach him. You better take him to Juilliard. I took him to Juilliard. He was 10 years old, and we grabbed him.
Okay, we had Brighton Beach, used to cost a nickel, and Juilliard was at 116th Street and Riverside Drive.
In 1953, Neil entered Lincoln High School in Brooklyn while still attending the Juilliard Prep School.
So Neil is one more terrific talented, but maybe a little more talented than other people at Juilliard. The difference is they all want to be great classical musicians, but Neil has doubts. First of all, he wants to make money. He wants to be popular. He wants to be accepted.
I was a nerd in school, and Lincoln High School was a tough school. And to be accepted, you had to play or sing or appreciate the music of the day. Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Ray Charles. So I started writing in that kind of a mode. Howard Greenfield lived in my apartment building at 3260 Coney Island Avenue. And he was kind of a recluse. He was very shy, and he finally worked up the courage to come in and say, my mother heard you playing, would you write a song? And I said, are you crazy? I don't know how to write songs.
I used to get together with Neil every afternoon while he was supposed to be playing classical music while his mother was out shopping. And we would sit together and write all day.
He came back the next day and we wrote a song each day for about a year. And I played it for friends and they said, stinks, or the worst. And it was bad. The first year was bad. And the more you do it, the better you become at it.
The people at Juilliard considered this terribly déclassé. What was he doing playing this crap, this rock and roll, this new music? It was considered, shocking.
Well, it made me important because I could go to the teenage parties then, and it wasn't Neil the nerd. It was someone who could play rock and roll and pop songs of the day, and it made me special.
And it was at this point in time that they realized that to pitch their songs, you had to go in 2 buildings in New York, 1650 and 1619 Broadway, and go floor to floor, office to office, and you had to sell yourself and your wares.
In 1957, Neil and Howie landed an audition with Atlantic Records. Executives were impressed with the Brighton Beach teenagers, and several of the label's stars would record songs by Sedaka and Greenfield.
I had to bring my mother in to sign the contracts, the songwriting contracts. And I remember riding back on the Brooklyn subway, New York subway, back to Brighton Beach, and I looked at the red Atlantic label, and I said, oh my God, I can't believe Howard Greenfield and Neil Sedaka written down as the writers.
By 1958, Neil Sedaka and Howie Greenfield had written more than a dozen hits for various labels, but were still without a permanent publishing deal.
Mort Schumann said, there's a new publishing firm opening up called Olden Music. So we went there, and Donnie Kirshner opened the door and said, I'm sorry, we're in conference. I think they were in business for 2 days, and they were sweeping the floors and getting it ready for I don't know what.
And 2 young writers who had just been turned down by one of the giants who had all the Presley songs, Hill and Range, were going through the building.
And I walked in with Howie Greenfield. We looked like Mutt and Jeff. He was very tall and heavy, and I was very short and skinny.
So Neil and Howie go to the piano, proceed to play me 3 incredible songs.
And Al and Don said, we'll take it. It was very exciting because Donnie Kirshner said he knew Connie Francis, the top female singer of the day. And Donnie introduced me to Connie Francis. We rode to her home in Nutley, New Jersey.
And they played, it seemed like they played into the night. I mean, they did play like till 2 o'clock in the morning. I listened to them from 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I got so tired. And the songs were beautiful, slow ballads. So I said, look, fellas, don't you have something, like a little more lively?
And I told Howie that I was going to play Stupid Cupid for her. And he said, you can't play that. You promised it to the Shepherd Sisters. And I said, I'm going to play it for her. And I sang, Stupid Cupid, you're a real mean guy.
I'd like to clip your wings so you can fly. Stupid Cupid. I'm in love and it's a crying shame. And I know that you're the one to blame.
The song had to be pretty bad with a title like that not to make it.
Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me.
Stupid Cupid was a top 15 hit in the summer of 1958. Sedaka and Greenfield was signed by Olden Music to a 5-year publishing deal. Other talented teenagers would soon follow.
So it was Bobby Darin, Sedaka and Greenfield, eventually Carole King, Man and Weil.
Olden's stable of songwriters grew, and so did Neil's desire to do more than just write songs.
We had organized a band in New York called the Nortonelles, Norman, David, and Neil. And Norman, the trumpet player, said, I think we should go to the Catskills. There's a new place called the Esther Manor Hotel, and we can get laid there. Very easy. I said, oh, good.
And my mother's Esther. And my mother always had older musicians, but young, good-looking waiters and busboys to keep the guests happy. And these 4 young men pulled in, and my mother said, I'm so sorry. All the waiters and busboys' jobs are filled.
We were little pishikas about this high. I said, no, we're the band. Oh, she said, I'm calling the agent right now. How dare he send me children?
And Neil and Norman convinced her to give them a chance for the weekend. And my mom hired them.
But that day I had also met Esther's daughter, who was 16 years old, the lovely Liba. And she and I had an immediate eye contact and an attraction. And I turned around to Norman Spiz. I said, you see that girl? I'm going to marry her.
My mom was saying, piano player? Girls married doctors, lawyers, and if you're stuck, an engineer or a dentist, But piano player? She wasn't too keen on it.
By the fall of 1958, Liba Strasberg's new boyfriend would be more than just a piano player.
About 6 months into the songwriting contract, I kept hocking them to have my voice recorded. And I was turned down by several labels. They thought my voice was not right for the market, a little too high, a little androgynous was the word.
Neil's publisher, Al Nevins, eventually got Sedaka a recording deal with RCA Victor Records. Conveniently, his first hit had already been written by him for someone else.
I had written the diary for Little Anthony and the Imperials as the follow-up to Tears on My Pillow. It was awful. So Al and I decided that should be my debut record as a singer songwriter on RCA Victor.
And the diary became a hit. It sold 600,000 copies. Now, 600,000 copies for a single was enough for Neil to end up with a Chevrolet convertible Impala. A Bay magnet, something which would tell everyone in Brighton Beach, honey, I have arrived. Okay, I don't have to be the best guy on the football team. I don't have to be a jock. I don't have to be any. I am Neil Sedaka.
After the diary, people expected me to come out with another doo-wop ballad, and I came out with this Jerry Lee Lewis, I go ape every time I see you smile. I'm a ding-dong gorilla, carry on caveman style. And they were shocked because they said, this is not Neil Sedaka, what is he doing? As a result, it was a flop in America.
RCA considered dropping Sedaka as quickly as they had signed him, until Neil found inspiration just a few desks away at Alden Music.
I called Howie in. I wrote at least half of the song, and he finished the lyric, and he said, now I'll polish it. I said, oh no, leave it as is. I want a very homespun, layman kind of song, and that's what clicked.
Oh, Carol, I am but a fool. Darling, I love you, though you treat me cruel.
I remember driving my Chevy Impala, and I was pressing the buttons on the radio, and I heard Oh Carol on 3 stations simultaneously. Wow.
I will surely die. Darling, there will never be another.
I was in high school, and I was answering his fan mail in study hall. And he called me one day and he said, I'm going to South America.
I will always want you for my sweetheart.
It took us 20 some odd hours to Rio. I got off and there were thousands of kids on the airstrip. And I said to my father, there must be somebody very famous on this plane. And I walked off and they were holding signs, Salida Sedaka, welcome Sedaka.
Don Kirshner and RCA sent Sedaka abroad constantly. While Neil's international status grew, his relationship back home suffered.
And he came in one day and said, you know, this isn't fair to either of us. A whole new world has opened up to me. I want to be able to date other people freely, and I think you should too.
Darling, there will never be another.
I was devastated. My world was over. Everything was over. And that went on for a few months.
And I remember one evening, my husband and I were in bed, and he was out with the guys, and he came back in and he said, Mom, Dad, I'm going to get married. My husband said, what, are you crazy? You're only 22 years old. I said, Dad, how old was I when I got married? He said, 18. I said, so what's wrong with 22?
Neil and Liba were married on September 11th, 1962, at the Esther Manor.
Liba wanted to move to Manhattan, and I was a bit of a mama's boy. I chose to stay in Brighton Beach, right across the street from Mom and Dad.
By 1962, Neil Sedaka and Howie Greenfield were turning out hit after hit with apparent ease.
Howie used to force me to write. I had a love-hate relationship with writing. I had to be forced. I loved when it was over, but I was frightened to death during the process of writing that I wasn't up to par, that I had to follow a top 10 record.
The song that would become Sedaka and Greenfield's signature tune proved to be equally daunting to write.
I had to convince Howie. I came up with the title and the tune and the idea, and he kept pushing it aside, and finally I was recording it.
Do-do-do down, do-dee-do down, down, comma, down, do-dee.
In those days we only had 4 tracks, not like today, umpteen tracks. And the musicians thought I was nuts because the first 2 takes were do-do-do down, do-be-do down, down, comma, down, the whole 3 minutes. And then finally the last was the lead voice.
Breaking up is hard to do. Don't take your love away from me. Don't you leave my heart in misery. If you go, then I'll be blue. 'Cause breaking up is hard to do.
Oh, we came on at 62 and we went to 26 the second week. I said, what? It's gonna drop dead. It's gonna go to 25, that's it. It'll stop at 24, that's it. It went from 26 to 10 to 5 to 3 to 1.
Neil was just as pessimistic about his next production.
When Liba and I first got married, and when we had sex, we thought it was, that was it. It was lovely and fine. We never thought of having children. We didn't know whether the actual process would work and how it worked and why it worked. And she conceived the first shot.
Dara Sedaka was born in the summer of 1963.
She was due June 26. She arrived June 26. She's always been very prompt.
I just had a lot of fun. I was really, really happy. I had my macaroni and cheese.
Now I know that it's true. Don't say.
Neil Sedaka had become a husband, a father, and a multi-million selling pop superstar.
I beg of you, don't say goodbye. Can we give our love another try? Come on, baby, let's start anew. 'Cause breaking up is hard to do.
And he was naive. He was so protected and so insulated, he didn't have a clue.
My royalty checks went to my mother and father, and Libra and I were put on a salary and lived like 2 little kids.
I was giving them, as youngsters, a certain amount of money for the rent, for the food, and for the clothing, and for the living, and banking the rest for him.
She shielded me from the business end, and I'm not a very good businessman.
He didn't know how his rent was paid. He didn't know how he bought things. He was given pocket money, and things showed up on his table, and his bills were paid. That was his life. And when he got married, Liba inherited that same world.
My mother-in-law had a very good friend who she felt should manage Neil. He had no experience in the business. I think we finally established that he was an air conditioning salesman.
Though Ben Suter was indeed an air conditioning salesman with no managerial experience, the relationship worked for a while.
But he was one of these kind of guys, and literally we couldn't choose toilet paper without his approval. He made enemies along the way. He was a very abusive hard-edged guy. I had Breaking Up Is Hard to Do, the #1 record in the world, and he booked me as an opening act at the Copacabana for Jan Murray. And slowly, at the end, I realized that he was taking advantage of Lieber and I.
You know, Howie Greenfield wrote the lyric, breaking up is hard to do. But there's another truism, which is that growing up is hard to do. And Neil began to have to assert himself.
Finally, I said, Ben, I think we should part. And he said, well, I'm coming to your house to beat you up. I said, what? I said, I'm locking the door. He said, I'll break down the door. I said, I'll call the police. And Lieber was afraid of him. She said, no, I'm afraid of him. Don't. I said, no, I really have to take the bull by the horns and
take back control over his life. Trust in his life partner, who's Lieber, to begin to take over doing all of that stuff because it was his life.
I mean, even if the music was childlike, which was part of the charm, you really had to realize that this life is not a fantasy, and you have to grow up.
Neil and his newfound maturity were about to be dealt another blow.
In February of 1964, the Beatles went on the Ed Sullivan Show, and the world changed.
People were getting tired of hearing, doobie-doos. I'm sure Neil Sedaka was tired of writing doobie-doos.
Melodies were harder to come by. Melodies, after a while, where you started to repeat yourself. I wasn't courageous enough to try something else.
Neil became a full-time daddy and husband.
The Sedaka family became a foursome when Mark was born on October 16th, 1966.
He had 2 young children, he had a wife, he had responsibilities, and he had nothing.
What Neil Sedaka did have was the international audience he had built nearly a decade earlier.
And Neil and Lieber, with great courage, and Lieber deserves big credit now because she really became the replacement surrogate for Eleanor, took Neil by the hand with the kids, and they went to London.
I remember when we moved to England, the TV was bad. That was like the only thing I noticed when we got there. They had 3 channels, and I think in the morning, there was a test pattern that I watched for like an hour of a girl with a sock puppet, and I would just sit there staring at it.
So I went over to England to do small clubs in the north, such garden spots as the Wookey Hollow and the Golden Garter, working men's clubs in the north of England. And drunken people would yell out, sing "Oh Carol," melancholy baby.
I just remember the first time I saw him actually live, and I went to the club, the Talk of the North, and the first words out of his mouth was, "Do you have a Valium?" Just before he went on.
He had to sing "It's a Long Way to Tipperary," "Bye Bye Blackbird." He had to do these beer-drinking, good old boy songs. But in the course of it, Neil called me from Europe, and he said, there's a guy here who I think is beginning to happen in America.
And we met in London at I think it was one of the Bee Gees concerts that we met.
And his name is Elton John.
In 1970, Neil Sedaka released Emergence, an attempt to join the burgeoning singer-songwriter movement.
James Taylor, my old friend Carole King, Joni Mitchell.
After the album's commercial failure, Neil knew he needed a change.
So I went to Howie and I said, I think we should go our separate ways. It was very sad because when you're writing with someone, it's like a marriage. And it was very sad. And we wept. We wept. It's a sad thing. You want to go on creatively, but at the same time, you want to develop and grow.
And he began to write with a guy named Phil Cody. Now, Phil Cody was very serious and very different from Howie Greenfield. But that brought out something which Neil needed to bring out at the time, which was his pain.
Well, he was pretty driven. I mean, he was like eating nails to get back in the fray. I mean, he was spitting fire to be popular again.
The songs of Sedaka and Cody were mature, poetic, and unavailable in America. In 1974, after 2 successful British albums, Neil and Phil sat down to write the title song for a 3rd LP.
And it was a bright, sunny day. And we weren't getting it right away. I mean, it was like he was playing it and I really wasn't understanding it.
I used to say, Phil, every tune has to have a drop-dead chord. So I was determined, I was in the key of F. I wanted to get to this chord. So I did. There's the drop-dead chord.
And a couple months later, he sent me a demo. And it was just rocking for the 70s. It was really a great song.
Laughter in the Rain was a hit, destined to languish on another British LP. In the fall of 1974, the Sedakas threw a party at their London flat. Neil's agent suggested they invite a few special guests.
All these people that were influenced, as they were growing up, they were influenced by Neil. And Neil said, no, they would never come. That's McCartney, that's Elton John. I said, yeah, but Neil, you're Neil Sedaka. You have to understand what you meant to them.
And, he didn't have a distribution deal in America, and I couldn't believe it. And we were, forming Rocket Records in America, and I got to know Neil quite well when he was in England, because he was always in England, because that's where his records were selling. And I said, would you be interested in going on Rocket? And he said, sure.
And that's how it happened. And the second he got the credibility of Elton John, then immediately people had to think he was great and had to think he was hip again, because Elton John said he was hip.
And they put a red hat on me with a big cigar. I looked like a mafia type, this pinstripe suit, and that was the cover of Sedaka's Back album.
Sedaka's Back comprised the best songs from Neil's 3 British albums, including the first single, Laughter in the Rain.
Lieber and I were leaving the Beverly Hills Hotel, and on the radio, in the suite, came the disc jockey. He said, and now the #1 song in the country, Laughter in the Rain. And we danced. We danced to it.
Neil Sedaka's comeback would produce 10 top 40 hits, including another #1, Bad Blood, and a bluesy remake of Breaking Up Is Hard to Do. But the biggest hit would be a new song, written with his old partner, recorded by someone else.
It's very funny, but after I started writing with Neil, though, I did notice a slight change in the way how he was writing lyrics, which were for the better. I thought when they did Love Will Keep Us Together, I thought that was their best thing since Breaking Up Is Hard to Do.
And someone at A&M Records played it for the Captain and Tennille, who were just starting their record career, actually.
American Top 40. Here it is, the most popular song in America for the year 1975. Written by Neil Sedaka and Howard Greenfield and sung by the Captain and Tennille. Love Will Keep Us Together.
Love will keep us together. Think of me, babe, whenever some sweet talking girl comes along, singing a song. Don't mess around, you just gotta be strong. Just stop, 'cause I really love you. Stop, I've been thinking of you. Look in my heart and let love keep us together.
And I was so flattered at the end of the record, if you listen carefully, they'll say, Sedaka's back.
The following year, Neil released Stepping Out, his third album for Rocket. 3 singles were released. Only one cracked the top 20.
The enthusiasm from the record companies started to wane a bit. And I had an offer from Elektra Records, and they offered me a lot of money.
Neil's 4 years at Elektra produced only one hit, albeit a special one.
When you walk into a room, your beauty steals my breath away.
When you look into my eyes, I find it hard to find the words to say.
Wanna run away and hide. I just got to let you know. Feel so tangled up inside. I should have never let you go.
Should Have Never Let You Go would be Neil's last top 20 record.
Even though the record sales diminished, it was no longer a shock because I could sustain myself and the family performing all over the world.
You tell me that you're leaving. I can't believe it's true. Girl, there's just no living without you.
As the 1980s began, Neil Sedaka's pop chart comeback ended. For Neil, the decade would bring change. From singles artist to touring artist. And loss. Neil's father, Mac, and his sister, Ronnie, both died of cancer. Mac was 67, Ronnie was 53.
Sometimes I'll see even my dad's calves. There's certain anatomy that I see from Mac, and the simplicity.
From what I understand, just the most popular, most beautiful girl in high school, and it was really sudden and shocking when she died so early.
In 1986, Neil's lifelong lyrical muse succumbed to AIDS.
Howie Greenfield was a complex person, funny, great sense of humor. Through his lyrics, he could be whoever he wanted to be. And he could be a lot of different people. He was like a magnetic personality. He drew people into him. He was just divine. He was divine.
Breaking up is oh so hard to do.
Well, that's one of the reasons maybe why I write, because you think of mortality, and there are very few things that can bring immortality except for paintings or music.
Someone once said to me, "How does it feel to be married to a living legend?" I said, "It feels great being married to a living legend. It feels better to be married to a working living legend."
Neil, how many concerts do you do a year?
Concerts?
Yeah.
Total of about 6 months, 2 weeks every month. Total. Average.
He's real. He comes out, and this is a real person. This is not manufactured. This is his real name. You know, he didn't change his name. This is a real guy, and they associate with this real person who comes and plays these beautiful, sings these beautiful songs.
I have to look at my list of songs. There are so many hits, I don't know what to sing here. Mr. Humility tonight.
This is me. Here's my heart. Look at my heart for 1 hour tonight. Here it is. He goes, "Oh, thank you very much." Puts his heart back in. He does everything like that.
I'm two different people. Neil the singer and Neil the person. You have to be. Otherwise you go a little nuts, a little crazy.
What is it separating the two?
Two different people. Separate people.
You know, people go to doctors for these things.
I know. Now that I stare at the future, I feel so close to the past. I'm so afraid of tomorrow, wondering which one is the last. Here in the cold of December, I cling to a fragment of May. I trade you the world I have conquered for a moment of one yesterday.
You begin to think about how many years you have left. How much closer to the other shore are you than from the little shore where you left?
I think, of course I shouldn't say it, but I think that Leva says that she wants him to stop.
I will write to the day I die. I have a sudden surge of creativity.
We're considering taking up golf as a change of pace.
I mean, if you have a great song, and if you have a great record, there's no stopping.
And maybe forcing ourselves to relax a little bit. Hopefully see grandchildren.
I would love to have grandchildren and stay home for a little bit longer, sure. Do the 11 instead of the 16 gigs.
And then once that happens, I have a feeling Neil won't be that excited to run and work.
Are you pumped?
I'm very pumped.
Does
Of
it feel good?
course.
Does it feel like the old time?
It sure does.
How do you feel?
Happy this is over. The show is done. I leave the theater and I walk slowly back to my hotel room. And there's a neon sign outside my window. I swear it's lighting up your name. And when a stage, it's just a masquerade to hide behind the gladness. I make sure I please the crowd and cover up the tears that fill my heart with sadness. I'll keep a smile upon my face until the audience is gone. And now I must stay strong. The show